Hey everybody, welcome back to Historical-ish. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you for a couple of things. One, thank you for all the support that we've been getting. It's been fantastic and really reassuring to get so much support on something that we care so much about, so that's really cool. Second, I just want to say thank you for being patient on the release of this new video. In the past month, I have gotten married, which has taken up the majority of my time, so hope you all understand. Going forward, we should be releasing a new video at least every week, if not every other week. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. Anyways, episode 7, let's jump right in. Tier 4, number 1, Dara's footprints. Dara's temple is a site in Syria built by the Hittites, and it was built over 3,000 years ago in the Iron Age. The site was destroyed in a Turkish airstrike, so only rubble can be found there today, but the site notably featured a couple giant footprints. They were 3 feet long, which is obviously not human, and 2 of these footprints are roughly 30 feet apart, and oriented in a way as which whatever created them would have been walking in stride. Now this would show a rather large stride for whatever creature or creation these people made or communicated with. The giant would have had to have been around 65 feet tall to match our understanding of the dimensions of the human body. The site contained large carvings of lions and even a sphinx, which is pretty important. Historians have pointed out that the layouts of this temple closely resemble the layout of King Solomon's temple, suggesting that either temple may have been inspired by the other. So there are a wide range of theories about where these footprints came from or who created them. Some theories suggest that these were actual footprint indentions from giants, which we've talked about previously as the Nephilim who walked among men in biblical times. They could have also been created by the temple builders just to have been representative of the footprints of their gods. Or they could have just been carved out by the temple builders and there's no historical meaning at all, which I find a little bit unlikely, but it's still interesting is what is the unknown reason on why the builders would decide to make these giant feet. It suggests that they did experience something, or maybe they have stories of giants that had been passed down through the generations, like many ancient cultures showcase. And those depictions survived in their artwork and architecture. Number 2, Dogu. Dogu are small humanoid and animal figurines that were created during the Jomon period, which was between 14,000 and 400 BC in prehistoric Japan. And these Dogu are only found exclusively within this period. The total number of Dogu found vary among sources, but generally range between 15,000 and 18,000. They have been found all over Japan, mostly in the east, but what's interesting is that not a single one has been found on the island of Okinawa. There are a few different types of Dogu found, mostly falling in the categories of heart-shaped, horned owl, goggled eye, and a pregnant woman type. Many scholars believe that these figurines acted as effigies of people, and they performed what is known as sympathetic magic with them, essentially acting as representations of a person. The illness or any other misfortune would be passed from the person to the figurine. Some interesting pseudo-archaeological theories include the figurines being ornate representations of modern-day astronauts. Their helmets and goggles seem to resemble this, but this is another piece of evidence that modern-day ancient astronaut theorists use to support their claims. Although there are various theories ranging from sane to insane, nobody really knows why these figurines were made, and this still remains Japan's oldest mystery that is yet to be solved. Number 3, the Nebra Sky Disc. The Nebra Sky Disc is a bronze disc of about 12 inches in diameter. It's blue-green and is inlaid with gold symbols that are interpreted generally as the sun or full moon, a lunar crescent, and stars, which is interesting because there is a cluster of 7 stars which can be interpreted as the Pleiades. 2 golden arcs along the sides, interpreted to mark the angle between the solstices, were eventually added later. A final addition was another arc at the bottom with internal parallel lines, which is usually interpreted as a solar boat with numerous oars, though some authors have suggested that it may represent a rainbow or the Aurora Borealis. Aurora. The disc was found buried on the Mittelberg Hill near Nebra in Germany and is dated by archaeologists to around 1800 to 1600 BC and attributed to the early Bronze Age Unitas culture. The Nebra Sky Disc features the oldest concrete depiction of astronomical phenomena known from anywhere in the world. In June 2013, it was included in the UNESCO Memory of the World Register and termed one of the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century. There's a lot of controversy about whether the disc is authentic, as it was found by looters, and there's a wide variety of interpretations about what it could actually mean. These interpretations range from calendars to symbolic value used in rituals among the people who created it. I personally think the depiction of the Pleiades is interesting, as we've talked about in previous videos, but I think that could be the key to understanding what the true nature of this disc could be. Number 4, Silphium. This was a plant used in classical antiquity for a variety of reasons and became so important to culture that it was worth its weight in gold. It was used in a number of different ways, from an aphrodisiac to medicine, which could actually be the first effective contraceptive used. It could also be used as seasoning for food, perfume, and a variety of other ways. It was believed to go extinct during the reign of Emperor Nero, having the last little bit of it after a final plant was discovered around 54 to 68 AD. It's a very interesting mystery, as it was said to be practically everywhere around the ancient world, but Theophrastus, known as the father of botany, stated that it was unable to be farmed. He seemed to take great interest in the plant, depicting all of its characteristics and uses. This, as well as some stylistic drawings of the plant, are all we have to figure out what this mysterious plant was. One major theory is that it was just over-harvested into extinction as it became so valuable. People often fed it to their flocks of sheep, which made their meat extremely tender, which is thought to be the leading cause of extinction. While doing some research about the plant, I have actually found some articles that were published only a day or two ago that all claim that the plant has been found in Turkey, where ancient Greek civilizations would have been located. There's still some study going on around the plant that was found, but that could be an interesting development in the search. Number 5, the stone spheres of Costa Rica. On the island of Isla del Caño and in the Diquis Delta in Costa Rica, there are over 300 stone petrospheres, which are attributed to the now extinct Diquis culture. Settlement of the region began between 1500 and 300 BC in the form of sedentary, small, and dispersed farming communities. Between the period of 300 BC and 800 AD, these settlements began developing into chiefdom-like structures which ruled over different territorial regions in the area. They exchanged goods with each other, and this is the period where they began creating different sculpted stones, including cylinders, barrels, and even spheres that you can see. Then between the period of 800 and 1500 AD, this is when the culture reached its final height. These spheres were placed in very important areas within the settlements, and these spheres can range from just a few centimeters to over 2 meters in diameter. They were constructed by hammering the boulders into a crude spherical shape, and then with denser rocks and sand, they would polish the stone surface to make it a perfect sphere. After the arrival of the Spanish to the region in the 16th century, there was no mention of any Europeans seeing any of these stone spheres, and they remained forgotten until they were rediscovered in the 1930s by the United Fruit Company, while clearing the jungle to make way for banana plantations. It is interesting to see what these were used for and how these cultures could make such perfect spheres. Spheres like this are found all over the world in ancient cultures, so this could be evidence of an advanced civilization that was able to travel the world, or something just one-off like language or farming that could be developed independently across the globe. Number 6, Tutankhamen's Iron Dagger. In 1922, Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered, and although there was evidence that it had been re-entered in ancient times, there was no looting that appeared to have taken place. Everything was in its intended place in accordance with burial practices of the time, and among the thousands of items within the tomb, there was one item that puzzled archaeologists: a small iron dagger. It may not seem like much, but to the Egyptians, the Iron Age was still 250 years in the future, well before King Tut would have been buried. It is believed King Tut died in 1323 BC, and the early evidence of Iron Age technology didn't emerge until around the year 1200 BC. And it's unlikely that the tomb would have been opened up hundreds of years later just to add a single iron dagger. After examinations of the dagger, it was discovered that it was made up of iron mixed with cobalt and nickel traces. What's interesting about this is that this combination of ore only occurs naturally in meteorites. So could the Egyptians have come across an extraterrestrial meteorite and then created a single iron dagger just for the pharaoh? Could be a possibility. I would like to note that ironworking did exist, but since the material was so rare, it was worth more than gold and only used for small ornaments, trinkets, or for religious purposes, and wasn't even commonly used by royalty. So King Tut being in possession of this iron blade is a true mystery. Number 7. What were the Vimanas? Vimanas have many different meanings, but are primarily used for mystical flying aircraft, and they are mentioned in many different Sanskrit texts. They were said to be able to fly at great speeds, and they can even travel through space and underwater. They were primarily war machines or aircraft equipped with deadly weapons, but could just be used for normal transportation too. They can travel in any direction, and with the help of, quote, quicksilver and great winds, they could fly vast distances and climb great heights. I've seen a couple of experiments about how Mercury can produce a strong magnetic field and essentially cancel out gravity once it's spun at a certain rate. Honestly, I have no idea how the science of that works, but the demonstrations that I've seen are pretty wild. It's as simple as some guy in a field that moves Mercury around with a magnet, and then the object can essentially float. Anyways, back to the story. In the Ramayana, the Pushpaka Vimana was a gigantic plane the size of a large city that could hold an unlimited amount of people. Essentially, imagine seeing a giant saucer carrying a city on top of it. The author of the epic also gave a bird's eye view description of India, which some scholars believe to be so detailed that it would have only been possible to describe the view from space. This detail in itself just begs the question of whether these actually existed or not. It's definitely interesting to think about. Number 8, the Baghdad Battery. This is a collection of 3 artifacts that were found together: a ceramic pot, a copper tube, and an iron rod. They were found in the capital of the Parthian and Sasanian empires in the Iraq, Iran, Persia area, and they date back to around 150 BC to 650 AD. Many think that they were just used for storage of sacred scrolls, but there's no consensus on the origin or purpose of them. A claim, however, that's rejected universally by archaeologists, funny how this kind of thing always happens, claims that they may have been used for some type of galvanic or voltaic cell, essentially just a battery. Apparently, it has the properties of an electrochemical cell, and it could have generated electricity through spontaneous oxidation reduction. I'm not really sure or understand how this process truly works, so I'm not going to try to explain it, but this process would not have been discovered until the late 1700s and early 1800s, and was supposedly impossible at the time where these objects date back to. I wish I could explain more on how or why this process works so you could get a better understanding of the artifacts, but it really does make you think about what kind of civilization we had in our ancient past, and it makes you think of how much we don't know or don't realize how advanced they were or could have been. Number 9, Joseph Smith Papyri. Joseph Smith is the founder of the Latter-day Saints movement in the United States, and they are more commonly referred to as the Mormons. Now, I know he didn't live in the ancient world, but a lot of where he got his inspiration was, funny enough, ancient Egypt. Egyptian funerary papyrus fragments, known as the Joseph Smith Papyri, still survive to this day. Originating from Thebes, Joseph Smith owned these, as well as 4 mummies, and according to Smith, these fragments held the records of Abraham and Joseph, 2 major patriarchs within the Bible. In 1842, he published what he claimed to be a translation of the Book of Abraham. He also claimed it held the Book of Joseph, but of course didn't release that translation. There are also some wild claims about the mummies being pharaohs, one of which being the pharaoh that ruled during the story of the Exodus. Although these claims are pretty big and, if true, would change the history of our past as well as even some biblical history, these are likely all ideas that were just fabrications by Joseph Smith to further his ideas. So this one did kind of stump me. I don't really think that this is a mystery other than Joseph Smith kind of making some stuff up, but I do think that this could go a little bit deeper. If anybody has any insider evidence that would support these claims, please let me know. I'm very interested in this. Number 10, the Olmec Colossal Heads. The Olmecs predated the Aztecs and Mayans in Central America around 1200 to 40 BC. They're the only known civilization that is dated to the Stone Age in the area, and we don't know much more about them except they had a big head fetish. 17 of these huge stone heads have been discovered, and the mystery here is primarily how did they make them and how did they move the volcanic basalt blocks over 40 miles where they originated from in the Tuxtla Sierra Mountains. It's reported that each head on average weighed about 40 tons, so moving something 40 tons over 40 miles would be a pretty difficult feat for a Stone Age civilization. Another great mystery is the facial features carved into these stone heads. Each head's facial features compares very similarly to the artwork of facial feature depictions that you would find in Africa, which should not have been possible because the contact between the new and old world had not been done yet. It suggests that what we know or claim to know about early civilization and trade may be severely flawed, because it seems fairly obvious that the Olmecs had contact with these people and could have even gotten their inspiration from their art. It's pretty agreed upon by Mesoamerican scholars that these stone heads were idols and were made to look like their leaders. So it could be interesting to see how the indigenous people of the region looked. It raises a ton of questions about ancient civilization and them possibly having a global network far earlier than what we would have thought possible, or have been told possible by academia. But that's a whole nother story. Anyways, that about wraps it up for episode 7. As always, if you have any evidence or any theories that you'd like to share, or even any counterpoints to any of the theories that I've shared, please don't forget to leave a comment. I love reading them. It just opens my eyes to a whole new perspective on any of the topics that I've covered. If you enjoyed watching, don't forget to like and subscribe. But at the very least, thanks for watching. We'll see you in about a week.